Started now. Welcome to the Community Board 2 Town Hall on the proposed Whitney project. My name is Brad Wellman. I'm the chair of Board 2. And we're going to hear tonight, I think most of you know about a very exciting project for our district, which is a proposed new museum space for the Whitney in the meat market. In some ways, I think you've heard that this is a return for the Whitney to our neighborhood, since it was on 8th Street near 5th Avenue for many years. So we're very excited to welcome it back. We have with us tonight representatives of the Whitney, the city's Economic Development Corporation, and the Parks Department, who will each walk us through tonight's presentation. After the presentation, at around 8 p.m., we're going to take questions from the audience. And if you could kindly fill in a speaker's card and return it to one of the board members up front by 8 p.m., that would be extremely helpful. There are speaker's cards out on the table, and I understand that some people don't know if they want to ask a question yet because they haven't seen the presentation. So if you are struck with a question, go get a card and fill it out and bring it forward. To point out also that we as Community Board 2 are going to be hearing this project in a formal public hearing process at Community Board 2's Zoning and Housing Committee meeting, and that will be on Tuesday, May 15th at 6:30 p.m. at Our Lady of Pompeii at 25 Carmine Street, and that's on the lower level. So that's Tuesday, May 15th, 6:30 p.m. at Our Lady of Pompeii, and that will be before the Zoning and Housing Committee of Community Board 2. Just to point out also that the Community Board has arranged to videotape the presentation, and yes, it will be on YouTube. David Siegel has kindly agreed to take this for us, and you can go to the board's website, CB2manhattan.org, and view it there at your own pleasure. I'd like to introduce the representatives of local elected officials who are here with us this evening. We have with us Gray Elam from Speaker Quinn's office. Gray. Lolita Jackson from the mayor's office. Hunter Johansson from Borough President Stringer's office. He's bowing. Aaron Drinkwater from Congressman Nadler's office. Away. And Crystal Goldpond from Senator Duane's office. And then if I could briefly introduce the community board members who are here. We have First Vice Chair Joe Hamilton. She's not even bothering. Second Vice Chair Bo Riccobono. We have a very important person who is the chair of the Zoning and Housing Committee, David Reck. Toby Bergman, who's the chair of our Parks Committee. We're still ready to start. You're not very popular in this crowd. We have our Assistant Secretary, Elaine Young. We have a public member of the Landmarks Committee, Al Bennett. He likes to be called Albert.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And our district manager, Bob Gormley.
Bob.
Our trusted staff member, Florence Arenas, who's outside. Thank you, Florence. And I'm sorry if I've missed anyone from the community board. You've shown up late. So tonight's first presenter will be Rebecca Asser, who is Assistant Vice President of the city's Economic Development Corporation. We're going to hear from Rebecca first, then from Adam Weinberg, who's the director of the Whitney Museum, followed by Michael Bradley from the Parks Department, who's going to speak specifically about the M&O facility. So Rebecca, if you could come up.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Astor. I'm with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And I'm here tonight because EDC has been working closely with the Whitney on the development of their new museum project on Gansevoort Street between West and Washington Streets. This project will complement the new Highline Park and will also create a great new public amenity for the community and for the city. In addition, the site will also house a maintenance and operations facility for the Highline in order for the Department of Parks and Recreation to maintain the Highline Park. I would also say that, as Brad mentioned, that a representative of the Parks Department will be here, Michael Bradley, to talk more about the facility. So I'd like to introduce Adam to tell you more about this exciting project. Thank you.
Good evening. I guess it's hard to commute with American Idol. It's very difficult. Anyway, welcome. It's great to be here. And I'd like to first, before I begin the presentation, is just to introduce a few members of our team. There is Bill Maloney, who is the project manager, director from the Whitney Museum. Bill. I'd like to introduce two of our executive architects. We have Scott Newman from Cooper Robertson Partners and Eric Borston over here. And then Michael Sillerman, who is our zoning lawyer, who will be coming up later to talk a little bit about the zoning actions. So that's the team. The one person who couldn't be here, who I wish could be here, is Renzo Piano. And just to say a little bit about Renzo Piano before I start with the presentation itself. 3 years ago, when Whitney was starting a project up on Madison Avenue, we interviewed a group of architects about possibly doing the project uptown. And we had a committee, and the head of the committee said, there's one question I want to ask every single architect who comes into this room. I want to know what is their favorite museum building, which I think is obviously a very good question to ask. So we interviewed something like a dozen or so architects, and every single one of the architects said that their favorite museum building was the Mill Museum in Houston, Texas. A few of them also said how much they liked Louis Kahn's building at the Kimball. A number of others mentioned the National Gallery in Berlin, but consistently, everyone said the Mill Museum in Texas. And it was very interesting because the one architect we weren't interviewing was the architect of the Mill Museum in Texas, who was Renzo Piano. So the committee all looked at each other and said, why is it that if we asked all the architects and they think that this is the best museum building, that we're not talking to the architect who built that? And hence we invited Renzo to talk to the committee and ended up selecting him first for the project that was uptown on Madison Avenue, and now he is working with us in the downtown project. And just a couple of words about Renzo. The reason I think people like Renzo's architecture for museums, first of all, is because he really cares about what happens inside the building and not just on the outside. That it is a place for art, and he's very respectful of that and very respectful of the galleries themselves and what happens in the museum. And when he does things on the exterior, it really is about connecting to what goes on in the interior. It's not just making a sculptural building for its own sake. And of course, being a museum director, art historian, curator, I want the best possible galleries. But one of the other great things, and we saw that right away when Renzo, we met with him, is he is a great listener. And he, there are always lots of people who want to tell you what they think, and he has, of course, lots of ideas, like any architect. But he is a great listener. And he's also somebody who is very good at looking and seeing and observing. And accordingly, he is really sensitive to the area in which he builds itself. And one of the nice outcomes most recently is Renzo Piano has actually set up his first American office in the meatpacking district opposite the Highline. I'll show you that a little bit later. Which I think actually is a particularly good thing, because that means when Renzo is here in New York, he has an opportunity to really spend time in the neighborhood, to observe it, to see it in different light conditions, different weather conditions, to see how people use it and experience it. And it's really a bonus. I mean, I wish we could have insisted that he did it, but in fact he did it on his own, and it's been a wonderful thing. And it won't hurt for the museum having him across the street while the construction would be going on, because that means he'll be watching every detail. No excuses. But so we are really delighted. Renzo has designed museum buildings throughout Europe. As many of you know, he did the addition for the Morgan Library, but this will be his only freestanding museum in New York City. And while the Menil Museum was really his first early great museum, we hope that he has other museum projects, but we hope this is the great museum project in the latter part of his career. So with that, I will jump right into the presentation. And we get a little art and art history beforehand, because that's the reason we're doing all of this. This is our founder, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney was a painter herself. And at the turn of the century, when she began her career, she realized there was no such thing as American art. At least nobody in the art world thought there was such thing as American art. And in fact, the way the Whitney Museum was founded was that she had proposed that they give her collection to the Metropolitan Museum, because in fact she never intended to found a museum, and the Metropolitan Museum turned it down. And I think they were probably disappointed when they discovered that she didn't give the $1 million endowment that she was going to give that went with it to build a new wing. But Mrs. Whitney's approach was to create a place for artists, to take risks with artists, to give an opportunity for artists at a time in New York City where American art really was not in the galleries, was not in the museums, and there was no museum representing American art. So she was, in her mind, creating the Artist Museum. So as Brad mentioned, the Whitney started downtown, first in McDougal Alley, which is where she had her studio. McDougal Alley, as you can see over there, was made up of actually a series of carriage houses and stables. There were a number of artists who had their studios there, and that's Mrs. Whitney sitting there amongst her own sculptures. She set up right downtown. I mean, she wanted to be, even though she was the richest woman in America at the time, she really wanted to be more connected to the artist community. And her idea, as I said, was never to start a museum. She created really what was considered one of the first artist spaces. And she had something first called the Whitney Studio, and then the Whitney Studio Club. And this was a place where artists could hang out. They had a billiard table, they had a library, they had sketching sessions, they had places where people could really just come and gather and talk. It was a place for American artists to be together and have a place to gather together. And then in 1930, the first Whitney Museum opened, and that's this building over here. And you could tell there's the Whitney Eagle, which was the symbol of the museum in the early days. This was the first home of the Whitney. It's actually the Whitney, it's now called the Studio School. I think some of you probably know it. Actually, it's in many ways very similar to the way it was, but this is where, for example, the first biennial was held in 1932, and this was the home for American artists. This was the place that she was creating. This was the place where artists who, at the time, who were totally unknown, people like Edward Hopper and Georgia O'Keeffe and Arthur Dove, and so many other artists who were in early exhibitions at the Whitney. In fact, all of them were in the first biennial. This was the home. This was the place they were. This was the part of town that they were focused on. This is a painting by Edward Hopper early Sunday morning. It was painted on 7th Avenue downtown. Hopper himself lived on Washington Square, and he very much recorded the life of downtown, which is where most of the artist community was living. And these, for example, are just a small selection of works that we picked out from the collection. These are paintings that were painted by artists in the collection in the downtown area. Most of the artist community lived below 14th Street. In fact, many of them lived just a stone's throw from the Whitney site at Gansevoort and Washington Street. These are artists who all lived downtown, worked downtown, and recorded the life downtown. This is where the Whitney has its roots. This is where it began. And for us, as Brad said, it really is very much a return. the core of the Whitney is artists, being the Artist Museum. And many people seem to think that the artist community has moved to Queens or moved to Brooklyn or moved to Hoboken. And in fact, there are lots of artists in all of those areas. But in fact, there are still hundreds of artists living in the downtown area. We have 2,500 artists represented in the Whitney collection. 1,500 of those artists are living artists. Probably around 400 of them live downtown. This is just a small selection of the artists in the collection who are in the downtown. And these, the ones that we highlighted, are just a handful of the artists who are actually within walking distance of the site at Gansevoort, Washington. So it truly is not only a return, but it's also a reconnection to the artist community. The other aspect of the museum, and this is not an accident, this is the art itself. It's the art and the artist. That's the reason that we're doing this building. First is to provide that place for the art and the artists, and then thirdly, obviously, for the audience and the community. This is just a handful of the key masterworks in the collection. And what I wanted to do is give you literally a lot of snapshots here. Anybody who can name every work here gets to pick which artwork they'd like to take home. Nobody on my staff's been able to do that yet, so if any of you can, I'd be very impressed. But this gives you an idea of just a fraction of the great masterpieces in the Whitney collection, most of which never get to be seen. We show at the most maybe 200 works of art at any given time from our collection uptown. The idea that we'll be able to show 3 and 4 times that amount of the collection downtown will be really fantastic for us. So that so many of these collection works, and the one thing I want to emphasize is we are going to have a major portion of the collection on exhibit downtown at the museum. It's not just a special exhibition space. Just to give you a sense, when Whitney opened on Madison Avenue in 1966, we had 2,000 works of art. Today, we have 18,000 works of art in our collection. About 3,000 of them are painting and sculptures. Is this mic working okay? It sounds like it's a little rattling. So this collection has grown tremendously, and also, when you think about it, the Breuer Building uptown, it's a wonderful building with fantastic galleries and something we look forward to having a long relationship with. But in 1966, museums were very, very different places in terms of the kind of art, the kinds of things that people expected in terms of amenities. The Whitney has outgrown the Breuer Building for some 20 years, and it's for that reason that, in fact, the Whitney has been trying to expand for some 20 years. Next. But it isn't simply the numbers of works, but it's also the size and scale of works. In 1966, when the Breuer Building was built on Madison Avenue, there was really no such thing as installation art. For example, this great full-size bedroom by Klaus Oldenburg, or the Ed Keenholt's The Wait over there, this kind of macabre, almost, actually it looks like it's something out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Or this Glenn Cedar piece, which was the original director's office of the Whitney that was reassembled and then put on its side. These are the scale of the works that the Whitney now has in its collection, and there are many of them. Video art didn't exist. Installation didn't exist. The largest painting in 1966 would have been a large Jackson Pollock, which is big, but nothing like what it is today. And if you go to the Whitney Biennial, for example, there are whole rooms, so there was no way the Breuer Building could ever encompass it. So the possibility of being able to expand as art expands and to be a home for living and contemporary artists, which Whitney is committed to, that's the direction we're going. And just to give you an idea of the total amount of square footage that we use on Madison Avenue, only about 15% of it is devoted to our permanent collection. And that's because we have so many exhibitions that we want to show that we never are able to show as much of the collection as we'd like to. Our ideal situation would be to have a more 50-50 arrangement, which is what in Whitney at Gansevoort we're looking at. The idea that we will have 25,000 square feet of special exhibitions and 25,000 square feet of permanent collection. And the reason that's also so important to us is, for example, when we open the biennial, and we're working on the biennial, 3/4 of the museum is closed because we only have one floor of the permanent collection on view. So that essentially sends a message to our audience that 3/4 of the museum is closed. Imagine going to any department store and they tell you 3/4 of the department store is closed. You probably would not go to that department store. I can assure you there are people who think that when they go to the Whitney. Next. And it's also the number of visitors that we have at the museum has grown considerably over time. We really have, in many cases, maxed out the amount of space that we have for our audience. Many of you see the lines out on the street going around the corner of the Whitney, and a lot of that is that the lobby was never designed for the audiences that the museum had. It was also never designed for a time when there were audio guides, membership desks, enlarged stores, informational counters, none of which existed in any major scale in the Whitney lobby. Now we all try to fit that in, and it doesn't work very well. One of the great things that you'll see in the new building is an expanded lobby that will fully be able to take the crowds into the building itself. One of the hearts of the Whitney Museum program is its education programs. When the Whitney began on Uptown in 1966, we had about 3 or 4 education programs in total. Today, we have a very large number of programs, working with young people, working with senior citizens, and one of the amazing things is there's not a single devoted education space in the entire Whitney Museum. We use conference rooms, we use the lobby, we use the restaurant, we use the galleries. It's all well and good, but today, there's probably not a major museum in New York that does not have some kind of classroom space, some kind of studio space, some kind of lecture hall. These are things we've never had in our space. And today, can you move on? And just to point out one thing is that one of the cores of our education program is the artist in the program. That's Chuck Close to the right, who has been very active at the Whitney. That's actually an artist, Jim Hodges. That's not Chuck Close earlier in his life, as somebody thought to me, said to me earlier today. But the idea that the artist is central to our programs. This is the place where artists feel at home. This is where artists come to see art. This is where artists hang out. That is the core of what we've always done, and it's the core of our education programs. Next. But today, we have these 35 different programs. We have, as you can see, 50,000 people who participate in the programs. You get a sense of the range and the numbers here. Imagine doing this without a single classroom, without a single devoted space. And in the new building, we will have education spaces, which I'll point out to you as we go through the plans, that provide classroom, studio, and other things. And as you can see, we've worked throughout New York City, throughout the region in our education programs, and we already have established relationships within the neighborhood. Another aspect which I'm particularly fond of is our performing arts program. The Whitney's performing arts programs goes back to 1966 in the Breuer Building. And in the early days, there really weren't a lot of places where you could see American performers of various kinds. So in the early days, in the 60s, we had performances by people like Duke Ellington, or Charles Mingus, or Ornette Coleman, and we also had Aaron Copland, for example, who performed in the Whitney Museum. But then we also had the more edgy kinds of performance people like Philip Glass and Meredith Monk and Trisha Brown and Lucinda Childs. All of this was done and continues to be done in our restaurant, in our lobby, in other spaces. It's great. We will continue to do that even in the new building, but it is a core part of our program today. This is actually a little view in our restaurant here of the Whitney Live program that happened this winter. It is one of our most popular programs, and it's open free to the public in our lobby, and I think we will continue to do it that same way. But we will also have spaces that you can actually have dedicated performance programs as an adjunct to the visual programs. Next. And then there's our film and video program. The Whitney has always been a leader in presenting independent film. It's also been a leader in showing video art. One of the things that we've never been able to do, as well as we'd like to, is the idea of showing independent film on a repertory basis, because we've never had a film theater to do that. That's something that will be in the new space. The idea that you could come 4 or 5 nights a week in the meatpacking district and see films is a fantastic thing. I think for me, for anybody who wants to be able to be there, as well as an active video program. We have worked with a number of the cultural partners, some of whom were there, some of whom are in process of getting there in the broader neighborhood. White Columns and The Kitchen are 2 organizations, artist organizations that we work with quite actively in the past. We look forward to working with them. 92nd Street Y is opening a facility downtown. I keep wondering if they're going to have to change their name because somehow 92nd Street downtown doesn't sound quite right. And WNYC will be opening their facility downtown this summer. But what we see is that the Whitney can really serve as a major cultural anchor to the whole neighborhood. Next. And then there's the educational organizations that are all within relatively short distance of the museum. The Whitney has had programs with various institutions. Some of these we've had active programs, others less active, but we will be within short walking distance of some of the greatest visual arts, art history, design, cinema programs in the world. And right now, actually, we have a couple closer to us, but we're going to be literally the center of it. And the idea that we would be able to participate in that, I think, is a fabulous thing. Next. Now to get towards the building, which is why you're here, to set the context. This is the area, and the Whitney site is right actually kind of behind this building. You know, one of the things we're so excited about is the character of the neighborhood. It's kind of the warehouses, the roughness. We like the activity of the street. We like what the fact that it is a 24-hour neighborhood with the meat packers early in the morning, with the stores and the restaurants opening at midday, and then even the clubs a bit at night. It's kind of great. And what the Whitney, I think, can add to all of this is the idea that we would be a major daytime destination. We also look at having area hours that are more variable to provide access for people. We're thinking about, for example, having night hours a little bit more frequently to make ourselves more accessible. It's a neighborhood, I have to say, I feel very at home in, and it's a site that, in fact, that if we had to pick any place, frankly, in New York to create a new Whitney, this would have been it. Next. So this gets us closer to the site. This has already changed, as you all know, which is exciting that the changes. The Whitney site would be right over here, the High Line being right there. And as I was saying, one of the things that we love about the site is the character of the neighborhood, the roughness of it, and the simplicity of it. And those are some of the characteristics that Renzo really wants to pick up on in his design, is the simplicity of it, the kind of connection to the character of the neighborhood itself. And that doesn't mean it literally is going to be some kind of duplication, which you'll see it's not. But the idea is that it understands, it's respectful of the neighborhood, respectful of the architecture, respectful of the site. I think what will be wonderful is that as you're standing here and you look, you'll see the Whitney over here, but you'll see in a minute how Renzo has carved away at the building and actually widened this whole area so that it actually creates even a larger view than is currently there all the way over to the river. Taking advantage of the river, taking advantage of essentially what I think of as the most outdoor neighborhood in the city of New York is really great for the Whitney, and you'll see what we're doing, I think, to maximize that. Next. So this is the site over here. That's good. Ooh, I like that graphic. That's very nice. One of the things that really matters a lot to us is the fact that we have a horizontal site. And to most people, that probably doesn't mean a heck of a lot. But when we were trying to build on Madison Avenue, one of the things that was so difficult is the idea of trying to build a vertical museum. Think about trying to see an exhibition and you have little square foot floors and you have to go through a building like that. It doesn't work. There's a reason why the Metropolitan Museum of Art works so well, and it is a horizontal museum. When you're trying to put together a show that has a theme or the work of a single artist, the idea that you can create a linear pattern, a way for people to go through things, is key. Plus, given the scale of the kinds of works that I talked to you about earlier before, how do you do that in a museum that's essentially vertical? So our hope was to take as much advantage of the horizontality of this great space, and the footprint of which is 43,000 square feet, which it's interesting to note because the actual square footage of the Uptown building is 65,000 square feet in total. Okay. One of the things that we most love is the connection to the High Line. The High Line, I think, will be the greatest park in the city of New York in generations. I mean, to my mind, it's the most revolutionary since Central Park. And we feel really fortunate to be at the anchor at the base of the High Line, and the partnership with the High Line in every sense, a kind of physical sense, an architectural sense, and eventually even a programmatic sense means a lot to us. So the idea that you have an outdoor space over there, the Whitney in the middle, and then you have Hudson River Park, the Whitney forms a bridge, and as you'll see, a kind of outdoor bridge between these two spaces. And then, you know, hopefully someday this will be, at least in portion, a wonderful park of some sort. Next. So these are some of the highlights of the building. I won't read them all to you. I mean, I actually heard somebody once give a spoof on a PowerPoint and how you put everything on the PowerPoint and then you repeat everything that's in the PowerPoint. So I won't repeat it. But you know, gallery space is key to us. The program space, I think, is for us unparalleled. It adds things that we don't have. It expands things that we do have. And I think it will make for what we think of as a totally transformative experience. This is not about just making a bigger building. This is about transforming the Whitney so that the Whitney is ready to provide a space for artists going into the 21st century. So this starts to orient you here to the new building. We're starting here in the Hudson River, and to emphasize the way the building will form a sort of bridge between the Hudson River, West Street, this being the new building over here, and then the High Line over here. Great. So let me just, maybe we should go up to the next, is the next one? Yes, that's a little bit easier to read. Thank you. Great. So let me describe some of the aspects and the thinking of the exterior of the building and how it all works. First of all, it is a very sculptural building. It actually has some interesting echoes of the Breuer building uptown. One of the things that I like so much about it is that it is sculptural. It has a kind of iconic form, but as you see, as I walk through this plan, you'll see that actually it is not a kind of heavy building at all. First of all, this is the ground floor level. This is all transparent, this entire level. This actually represents glass all the way here. At the very back, there are obviously walls, but this is all transparent. And you'll see in other images as we go through, when you're standing here, you'll be able to see through basically the entire downstairs of the building. So in effect, Renzo has created a building that almost looks like it's standing on point, where this, I think of it's almost like a little bit of a ballet dancer of sorts. This is where it seems as if all the weight of the building is resting. This is where the main entrance of the building will be, so that everything brings your eye visually over. This is actually a cutaway in the building, which you'll see in plan, but when you're standing here at the end of the High Line, you'll be able to look all the way over to the Hudson River. This is a big, open pedestrian area, some 8,500 square feet. Which will be a great gathering place. I'll show you a little bit more how that works. Just to give you a sense of it here, these are a series of terraces, which I'll talk about. The idea for Renzo was not to create a building that went up with a high street wall going up from the High Line so that you have a building like this, but in fact a building that kind of gently steps back from the building, so that in effect the High Line has a nice kind of coordinated step going up towards the top of the building. And so you'll see how it works extremely well with the High Line, connects to it in a way that I think is very gracious. Over here being West Street, a very busy, noisy street, this being the higher, the stronger side of the building, this is also the place where you'll get the really great views of the Hudson River going up, the Hudson River going down, and out over New Jersey. But you also will get these incredible views, as you'll see, going back into New York, into Manhattan as well. This gives you another view of the building itself, a sense of the cutaway in this little sketch. Right here you can get a sense. This is actually kind of a cantilever of sorts. There actually are some columns under this, but I'll show it to you in plan in just a minute. But the idea is that angle focuses you in on the entrance. Over here you'll see the other visitor amenities. You have the High Line, which is right here, and you get a sense of how that'll be. Over here, this street, one of the things that I like very much is that on Gansevoort Street, it's not a dead end, but it's a sharp turn, so the cars will not be moving down it quickly. It would be great if someday the cobblestones are returned to it. There are a few steps coming down here, but I think this should have a wonderful feel of a really great community gathering space, and a sense of activity, a sense of energy, and a sense of, again, a place where people can hang out like the Whitney of old days. Next. So let me walk you through the plan of the ground floor. I'm not going to go through every plan of the building, but this will give you a sense. So here is the overhang of the building, this dotted line. So that represents the overhang here and here. So the first part, Jeff, you want to just go into it. Now, let me orient you very carefully. This is the High Line represented by these points over here. Okay, Gansevoort Street you can see. West Street and the Hudson River would be over here. This would be the Meatpackers Co-op over here. So I think everybody knows where they are. So the idea is first to have a restaurant, which would be an indoor-outdoor space for approximately 125 seats. Not a huge restaurant, but a hopefully very nice restaurant. And the idea that it would participate with the outside means a lot to us. The next element we have is the shop, which would be focused on a bookstore and artist-produced materials. It may actually in some way connect physically to the restaurant itself. But Renzo, knowing and thinking that the commercial activities, the stores being over here on Washington Street, we were thinking put the commercial aspects of the museum closer to the commercial aspects of the street. And as you move away from this, you then come towards the lobby of the museum, which I indicated over here and mentioned before. It's a lobby that's large enough not only to handle the ticketing, the code room, and all the orientation kinds of things you need, which we've never had in 30 years uptown, but it will also be a space that we're going to use for programs, for performance programs, for education programs. It's going to double in a way as a kind of movable gallery of sorts. There's not going to be art in that part of it. There will be art in this little spot here. We will have a very lovely kind of jewel box gallery of some 1,100 square feet. Where we're going to be doing exhibitions called Reports from the Field, where we'll be changing the shows every 2 months. We're thinking of having a series of kind of roving curators, so it's almost like a magazine program for artists in a sense. And the whole idea is that everything that happens on the ground floor of the museum is our free zone. All the programs, all the activities, the exhibitions, that will be always free to the public. You won't have to pay until you actually go upstairs via the escalator here. This is our behind-the-scenes space. A space I actually feel very excited about and wax poetically. This is a loading dock. This is the first time that we've actually had a loading dock in maybe 30 years that you can actually pull a truck into. Today, when we unload or load art, we do it in Madison Avenue in the front door because it can't go through the back door of the building. When we had our Picasso and American Art Show last year, we loaded $1 billion worth of art across Madison Avenue. Now, there's nothing like seeing people walking up and down Madison Avenue as million-dollar paintings are cutting across their way. Now, you know, I mean, it's sort of charming, but think about the safety factors, think about rain, think about security. I probably shouldn't be saying this here, but in fact, this is not even standard museum practice to do this, obviously, anymore. This is one of the reasons why we desperately need to do it. We can actually fit full-size trucks into the building. They won't be hanging out in the street. We close them in, they're in with, out of the weather, total security, totally safe. We have this great art elevator, which will also be used as a public elevator, which I'll talk to you about, but any of you who know the large Whitney elevator now, this is an enormous, it's a moving room. So this one is going to be twice the size of the current Whitney elevator, which will be used by the public as well. And then these are the 3 public elevators that will be here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. Then the last piece here, which Michael Bradley will talk to you about when I'm done, is the maintenance and operations and office facilities for the High Line. And I have to say, we're really pleased that they're going to be right there as our neighbors. Next. Now we get to the building itself. And I'm just walking you through the kind of museum experience. Again, here's the High Line over here, Washington Street, and this would be Gansevoort Street and the Hudson River over here. So the idea is that you come down the street, there's the M&O space is over here, the Whitney restaurant is here, and the store is over here. You're moving away from the commercial zone, and the idea is that you come into the lobby, you have all the lobby activities, then you go up this escalator, the only escalator in the building, which will bring you up to a very large open window here, so that when you come here, you're being drawn to the light. The idea, like the great mantra, which I use over and over again, the mantra for the High Line is keep it slow, keep it wild, keep it quiet. That is our mantra too. We've adopted that. I hope the High Line people don't mind. But our hope is that as people go up and ascend essentially to the High Line level, things start to quiet down and people start to focus and be transported to the world of art, to the world of experience, to a place where they can commune a bit. This can be all great and wild and active, but this is where we want people to start to quiet down a bit. And you'll come up here and you'll have great views of the Hudson from this landing here. You will then, let's go to the next image if we could. In this space is the theater space. Behind it is actually a cafe. You'll arrive in a cafe that's about 2,000 square feet. That cafe will be a cafe and a media lounge where people will probably be able to hear audio and video, have computer access, and it'll be a cafe where people can get light food and that kind of thing with a great view of the river. When you come through the cafe, then you have this 175-seat theater. And one of the great things about this theater is this whole wall is a glass wall. So that if you're doing a lecture and you don't mind having the Hudson, the light behind you, you can have this either just scrimmed or wide open and the person is standing right there in front of the Hudson River. Or you can drop a screen and you could show a film in here. Or you have on the stage a small concert performance and close it down. So you have these great possibilities of using it in different ways. Plus, as you're going on West Street, you'll see people, you'll see things inside the building. And this is one of the ways I was saying, this is not a monolithic building at all, because you will actually have the transparency that you'll see into the building in various ways, here, 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 and various other places. Then you come up over here, and you have the office spaces, which will be here in the building, in this section of the building, which will be on 2 mezzanine levels over here. We have some of our in-house shops here and a number of our, and actually most of our mechanical spaces are here underground. I should mention that this will be a building that's silver LEEDs. It will be the first, I believe, green museum in New York, which we're very pleased and proud of. You come up here, and I think maybe should we go to the next image, Jeff? Is that the best thing? Yes, great. This is where the gallery zone is. So in effect, your theater was here, office is here. These are all galleries. Okay, so the first gallery, go to the next one if you would. This is our special exhibition gallery. This is one of the great glories, I think, of this new museum. From here to here is 250 feet. It's the entire block, which is an amazing space. And this is a space, which we can go to the next one, would look in a model form something like this. So from here to here is 250 feet. Over here are 3 smaller elevators. Over here is your large elevator, which I was talking about earlier. And like the Breuer building uptown, the elevators have direct access to the galleries. You don't have to go through a whole series of steps to get into it. You open up and you have the surprise and the glories of all the art in front of you. And we'll go to the next one. So you could have a single exhibition that takes up the whole space. So you could have an exhibition of a Richard Serra or a Richard Chamberlain or an Andy Warhol that takes up the entire space and you'd see it across an entire block. Or you could divide it into 2 or 3 different exhibition space. So this is actually, for us, a great thing. The idea that there wouldn't be any columns in the space. It would probably be the largest free-span gallery space in the city of New York. One of the other things that I'm really pleased about is our education facilities over here. Classrooms, studio, offices, our multimedia space for performance, film and video, and also education will be here, which also opens out onto what Renzo calls the testing platform. It's an outdoor gallery, so it's an indoor-outdoor space. These tie directly to our special exhibition spaces. Many museums have education departments buried in the basement. They have education wings. We believe that education is fully part of the process of the museum. So all of what we call the gray matter, the library, the conservation, our study center, education, all of that connects right to the galleries itself. This is a totally integrated museum. Next. And I just wanted to give you a sense. These are 2 spaces. This one on the left is Mass Mocha. This is part of the Dia space at Beacon. This space is about, I think, 15,000 square feet. The one we're contemplating is about 17,000 plus square feet. This is only about 12,000 square feet. So you get an idea of what it would be like to have that kind of space to install an exhibition. Next. These 3 floors are going to be devoted to the permanent collection spaces. And this will give us, what I'm saying, half of the space, of museum space devoted to the collection. We will have a display of the history of American art from 1900 to the present in these spaces. And what's great is there are 3 connected galleries that are connected by a combination of staircase that goes all the way through, which is also transparent, which you'll see in other views on that side, which give you views to the Hudson. These will also have skylight, some skylight up here, and there'll be selected skylights throughout the tops of the spaces here, plus a arrangement of windows. So the whole building is going to have this light that comes from the top at various locations, plus windows that pierce it, that give you great views into the city and of the Hudson. Next. And then one of the things I'm so excited about are these outdoor galleries. These galleries, there are about 15,000 square feet of outdoor galleries, which represents half of the exhibition space in the current Breuer building. If you go back one, if you would, Jeff, just for a second, because I think it's a little bit easier to see. The idea is that these outdoor galleries here, 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 and here could be a series of linked outdoor exhibition spaces where you could do a whole outdoor, for example, Calder show. And one of the great things is you could then go from staircase to staircase and just do the exterior of the building in nice weather, which would be fantastic. I can't think of a museum anywhere that has anything like this. Or you could tie it just to a single exhibition. Over here, there's a nice Marc de Souveraud. If you had a Marc de Souveraud show here, maybe you have some few Marc de Souveraud pieces here. If you had a permanent collection installation that included Calder, maybe you could just have Calder here. So it could be either tied just to that space, or it could be a series of linked spaces. And these will be seen as galleries. It's not a sculpture garden in the sense where there's a few things that stay there. This is the idea that artists can also do projects here and things that would be seen all from the High Line itself. And here's another view of it so that you can see. What you don't see is the High Line would be actually in the foreground right around here. But this gives you, it's a much more flattened sense. These all represent various angles. That's the cantilever I was talking about. But the idea that you have, as you can see, you have transparency here, you have windows here, windows here, windows here. So you will see activity. This is not again, a monolithic building in that way that you don't have a sense that there are people in this, that has a humanity to it. As Renzo said, I'm one of the last of the humanistic architects, and I truly believe that to be the case. Next. This is the north view of the building. So here's the High Line. If you were coming from the north, walking down the High Line towards the end of the High Line, so this would be the Hudson River over here, this is how you would see the north side of the building. FYI, these graphics are not any graphics that the Whitney has planned on. This was a nice fanciful statement by Renzo. Although it might be nice to have some kind of a Whitney sign it. Here you can get a sense of how these outdoor terraces will function. The idea that you're coming down the High Line and you're going to see this as an art building because there's art all over the building, to me is a very exciting thing. I cannot, again, think of a single museum that says art on the outside as well as on the inside. And again, that becomes the bridge between the outdoor space here and the outdoor space here. It capitalizes on what the neighborhood does best, and actually a history of what the Whitney has done best, which is many, many outdoor projects with Creative Time, with the Public Art Fund, with Central Park, and many, many other organizations. Oh wait, go back one more thing, because this is one thing I wanted to show. Is I wanted to emphasize, this is that big elevator. So you will see art moving up and down the elevator. This is all glass, going up and down the elevator. So when people are in it, you'll see people going up and down, but when the art is in it, the art will be going up and down. So the idea is that you see what is going. This is a transparent institution. You understand how it works. That's the nature of contemporary art. Next. Now we're looking at the west side. This is the view I was mentioning. If you're coming down West Street, this is where the theater is, so that you would be able to look into the theater from this side. This is where the escalator comes up, and this is a staircase that goes up the entire building, from which there are landings, which you'll have great, really fantastic views of the entire Hudson River in New Jersey, looking across. And then over here as the meatpackers go up. Next. Almost done. And just to give you a sense of how everything fits into the museum, this gives you a sense of how things, I actually almost look at this as a tipping of the hat to the High Line. I think, Renzo was so excited about the High Line. I think it's wonderful the way it's almost like a bow of the building. It would have been obviously great for the Whitney to be able to square the building off more, to have larger gallery spaces. But it's something that really is critical to the sense of the neighborhood. You get a little bit of a sense of that big open courtyard that cuts it off. And in fact, we are only using about 55, I think it's 55% of all of the zoning floor area for the project that we could have used. And the idea is we're not just building a big museum to build a big museum. We are trying, as I see it, to build a place that is a field of possibilities, a field of dreams for artists. We are building a building for the 21st century for artists, American artists, and a place that provides them with opportunities, indoor, outdoor, large scale, small scale, and video, performance, every possible medium. This is the future, we hope, of the Whitney Museum. And in my last couple of images, I just want to give you a sense. This is what we look at looking into the city. This is the source of so much inspiration of where the Whitney started, of American art, the urbanism of it. If you go to the next image, you can even see how directly, this isn't the literal view, this is an Edward Hopper watercolor in our collection. So much of the sources of these kinds of things were, the inspiration and the connection. And the idea that the Whitney is sort of like a beacon, a compass that looks out 360 degrees to America. Next slide. This is the view that you would see from the top of the building, looking down, looking at Ellis Island, where so many Americans came in, and so many, and this is, again, the core of American art. Looking out to the west, to the great American West, which was the metaphor, and continues to be the metaphor, but for so many American artists. And I'll end with this last image, because I think in a way it presents that sense of that. Jeff. This is a great painting in our collection by Mark Rothko, and while it's an abstract painting, it so much represents that feeling of freedom, that feeling of openness, that sense that the Whitney Museum is open to art, open to the country, open to the world, and I think so much open to this community, which we're so excited and so pleased to be able to join. Thank you very much. I'd now like to just introduce our partner, Michael Bradley, who's the Highline Administrator, and I just want to say, what a pleasure it is to be working with the city, and I mean that all the departments of the city. It's been a great partnership with the city. It's a great city, and I think that the Whitney will contribute so much to making it even a greater city. We're really so pleased to be able to work with you, Michael, and the Parks Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam Weinberg. I would say the exact same thing back to the Whitney, except that I also have to congratulate them on the courage of their convictions and the fact that they've embraced working with the city to the extent that they have as a full partner in their project a standalone maintenance and operations facility for the Department of Parks and Recreation for the Highline, and I think sometimes for a private group working in that kind of way with the city is somewhat like dealing the scene in one of my favorite movies, Brazil, the office scene where the paper is passed around. I'd also like to thank our partners on building the Highline, the City Economic Development Corporation, which is actually building it for us, and the Friends of the Highline, without whom this project would not be happening at all. Josh, David, and Robert Hammond, who conceived of the idea and went to Mayor Bloomberg and persuaded him to make this one of his priorities. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Michael Bradley. I'm the Highline Administrator for the Parks Department. And I'm here because we have an action as a part of the Whitney project, which is a site selection in the ULURP. And it's for a maintenance and operations facility, and I'll describe that. Could I have the next slide, please? Let me just tell you, most of you, I hope, already know a lot about the Highline, but it's an elevated railroad that was last used around 1980, and we are currently turning the city-owned portion, which goes from Gansevoort Street, where the Whitney project is, and where the M&O facility will be built, to 30th Street, where the rail yards are. Oh, I have a pointer. So, Gansevoort Street to 30th Street. It's all under construction at the moment, and the section from Gansevoort to 20th, I think that is 20th, will be complete by the end of the year. We hope to open it then. This is the, no, actually, I could just leave the overhead up for a while, and I'll try and direct you through. since the beginning of the planning for the High Line, I mean, there's some things that are self-evident. It's a very unusual project for the city and for the Parks Department. It has some unique challenges. One of them is that you cannot get up there without walking upstairs or in the future using an elevator. There is an at-grade entrance at 34th Street, excuse me, which is not part of the city-owned property. It's over the rail yards, for which there's a proposal which is in the works to retain that portion, but in the meantime we can't use it. We did look at the possibility of actually using dual-mode vehicles with rail wheels and tires and rebuilding the rail track in that area so that we could wheel in and wheel out materials. It was an idea that didn't get very far. So could we have the slide with the elevated, with the crane, just so people have an idea? That's the one. This is how we're building the High Line at the moment. We've actually had tractor-trailer trucks craned up there. And this is basically how anything heavy, which at the moment is everything but people, has gotten up to the High Line. And so we have a challenge that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the city in terms of how to maintain this park. Perhaps maybe not even at Riverbank Street Park. There's a road in. So one of the other things is that because of the elevated nature of the park, but also because this is going to be a really special place, it will, we hope, we believe, be intensively used, and it's going to be a fabulous discovered garden in a way, and that will require a lot of people to keep it up. So we will have a dedicated maintenance staff. It also will need a dedicated security staff, the Parks Enforcement Patrol, the guys you see in Hudson River Park in their uniforms. All these people need some place to work out of. And there aren't a lot of options. In fact, there is only one. And if you go back now, this is a slide shot from across the street, Washington Street in Gansevoort. And this building is actually no longer there, or this part of the building that was loading dock to the meat market building behind it, and it's been demolished. This will be the southern entrance to the High Line. There'll be a stair right about here, and then there'll be a pathway through the stair under the High Line to the plaza of the Whitney beyond. This is the only city-owned site, and we could have the next slide also, please. And here's the view from the north, looking at the side of this building, which is about to be demolished this summer in preparation for our needs. And it's the only city-owned site, both under and adjacent to the High Line, for the entire length of the city-owned portion of the High Line. We did consider the possibility of trying to stage from the High Line itself, but it's not a very big or wide space. So this was our option from the very beginning. Go ahead, next please. I just wanted people to have an idea of what the construction looks like and understand the pathway system, so that when I'm talking about the building, you can see how people will go in and out of the maintenance and operations building, and then in little small vehicles, golf cart type vehicles, up and down the line, to work on the plant beds and pick up the garbage and all those other fun things. I wanted to mention at the beginning, it's tough following Whitney was talking about one of the great collections of art in the world and a fantastic new museum building, and now I have to talk about garbage and public toilets. What we are doing temporarily, well, obviously this project will not get built for 3 or 4 years, is we are putting office trailers on the High Line itself, north of where we're finishing the first section, which is the 20th Street. So we'll have a yard there between 20th and 21st Street, which we will have to move around to accommodate construction of the next section. And it's not going to be ideal. It will be very difficult, in fact. And we will need a crane. We will have probably something similar to a ship's davit to pick up things from trucks on the street and take them back down. But we'll manage, but in the meantime, we really need a permanent facility. Next, please. And the next one. Okay, you saw the building in some of the earlier renderings and perspectives, but this is focused a little bit more on the M&O side. And this is the view looking from approximately a little west of 12th Street. You see the High Line here on the left, and this is the envelope of the M&O space. It's approximately 26,000 total square feet on 4 levels above grade and 1 basement. And the entrance, let's see if we have a good view of this. The terrace will not be the M&O space. There'll be art and exhibitions there, but it won't actually be our roof to use. So we have an office level on the 4th floor, the main M&O level on the 3rd, with access on a cantilever driveway over the Meat Market driveway onto the High Line for the smaller vehicles that I mentioned. At grade, in entering through under the High Line through the Meat Market driveway, trucks, especially garbage trucks, will come and go and enter in bays there and stay there. Next one, please. This is looking west. The High Line is here. So you see this in perspective without the High Line there. This shows, and I'll talk about when we get to the plan, how the public will enter and be able to go up and down in the space. But this will be the elevator entrance from the street to the High Line, and then also usable into the building. And then there'll be an entrance here over a bridge connecting to the High Line, which will have access to the public toilets, and then also to the 2nd level above the High Line, which will have public meeting space. Next, please. This slide is not very clear or hard to, or easy to read, and in fact, this suggests that there'll be vehicles on the ground floor going this way, but in fact, that's the Whitney's truck access in the back there. But this just gives you a sense of how the space is shared with the Whitney structure. It's going to be a separate structure legally. It will be